The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Disability Inclusion, and also the Honourable Member for Windsor-Tecumseh.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I rise to speak to Bill C-248, an act to amend the Canada National Parks Act. I want to begin by acknowledging that the land I represent is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, the Ojibwa, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi. Mr. Speaker, I share my colleagues' enthusiasm for the creation of an Ojibwe National Urban Park, and I recognize his long-standing advocacy. Both of us recognize that Ojibwe is a precious gem, unlike any other. Compared to, say, Rouge National Urban Park in Toronto, Ojibwe is a postage stamp of land. But in its 300 hectares, Ojibwe contains rare Carolinian forest and tall grass prairie, and it has the most biodiversity in all of Canada, hundreds of plants, reptiles, insects, and wildlife. When I first got elected in 2019, my first meeting with the Prime Minister's office on Parliament Hill was about the creation of an Ojibwe National Urban Park. And not quite 2 years later, I joined the Minister of Families, Children, and Social Development at Ojibwe, in addition to dozens and dozens of local community partners, to announce our government's commitment to create 7 new national urban parks, among them Ojibwe. It was a historic day, Mr. Speaker. Parks Canada was put in charge of creating an Ojibwe National Urban Park, which makes sense, since Parks Canada has over 100 years' experience building national parks. We trust the experts. Since that day, Parks Canada has been busy putting in the work to make Ojibwe National Urban Park a reality. Let me walk you through, Mr. Speaker, the Parks Canada process that I support and the real measurable progress we have already made to building an Ojibwe National Urban Park. Last year, we established a local partnership committee to oversee the process of creating an Ojibwe National Urban Park. Parks Canada provided the City of Windsor with $600,000 to begin consultations and the groundwork to carry out a joint work plan with Parks Canada. Windsor City Council voted unanimously in favor of this process. We brokered an agreement between the Windsor Port Authority, Transport Canada, and Environment and Climate Change Canada to transfer Ojibwe shores to Parks Canada for inclusion into an Ojibwe National Urban Park. And I am proud to say that we will have some even better news to share with our community in short order on the transfer of Ojibwe shores. Mr. Speaker, Ojibwe Shores is the last piece of natural habitat on the shores of the Detroit River. It is priceless. It is beyond value. And our community fought tooth and nail to keep it safe from bulldozers. And now, through the Parks Canada process that is underway, we will protect Ojibwe Shores forever. Forever, Mr. Speaker. In December, Parks Canada began a series of open houses and pop-up workshops that are engaging residents of our community, listening to our community members, getting local feedback on the design of an Ojibwe National Urban Park. And what I mean by that is the design not just of the footprint of Ojibwe National Urban Park, but the design of how Ojibwe National Urban Park will be managed. And most importantly, Mr. Speaker, we are in the process as we speak of working towards a collaboration agreement with our Indigenous partners, Caldwell First Nation and Walpole Island First Nation. Mr. Speaker, 2 weeks ago, I had a chance to meet with Chief Mary Duckworth and members of Caldwell First Nation to talk about the Parks Canada process of building an Ojibwe National Urban Park. And what I heard is support for a Parks Canada process that envisions Caldwell First Nation not only being co-designers of an Ojibwe National Urban Park, but also co-managers and co-stewards of an Ojibwe National Urban Park. And in that way, the Parks Canada process is not just about creating an Ojibwe National Urban Park, but it is also about taking concrete steps on the path to reconciliation with our Indigenous partners. Mr. Speaker, the work of building an Ojibwe National Urban Park is already being done. Ojibwe National Urban Park is already being constructed, much like we see the construction of the Gordie Howe International Bridge right next door moving forward. And the Parks Canada process is the best path forward for one major reason. It prioritizes from the very start community consultation, with our community and with Indigenous communities like Caldwell.
I believe I have a point of order from the honourable member for Winnipeg Centre.
Yes, I've raised this several times in the House before to refrain from using the word our Indigenous people. We are not owned. We are independent individuals. We are human beings, and we are not owned by anybody. Right. So I would like to remind the member, through you, Mr. Speaker, to not use the word "our." Thank you.
Thank you, and really not really a point of order, but a good suggestion for all of us who speak in the House of Commons. Also remind the honourable member who's speaking. The honourable member for Windsor-Tecumseh.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and that is an excellent point of order and well taken. So thank you very much for that to the honourable member. Resuming, as the Parks Canada process is the best path forward for one major reason. It prioritizes from the very start community consultation with our community and also with Indigenous communities like Caldwell and Walpole Island who have historic ties to Ojibwe. Consultation with First Nations from the start on the design of the Ojibwe National Urban Park is especially important, not only because Canada has a constitutional duty to consult with Indigenous communities on the creation of national parks, but because Ojibwe provides a genuine opportunity to strengthen our relationship with Indigenous peoples and advance reconciliation. Imagine an innovative Made in Windsor model where Indigenous communities and environmental groups co-design an Ojibwe National Urban Park and share stewardship of an Ojibwe National Urban Park. Imagine a process that allows other community groups to have a real voice in the design of an Ojibwe National Urban Park. In the spirit of Black History Month, we want to hear from Amherstburg Freedom Museum or the Essex County Black Historical Research Society to connect Ojibwe to the story of the Underground Railroad. And again, I want to recognize my colleague, the MP for Windsor West, for being a passionate champion of Ojibwe all these years. His contribution to this work cannot be understated. However, his Bill C-248 bypasses community consultation, falls short of our duty to consult with First Nations, and creates a duplicate process that could jeopardize the progress and partnerships already developed by Parks Canada. Here are some of the most significant concerns I have with C-248.